Hello, welcome everybody to our webinar 3, Saving Our Soils and Ecosystems. This is part of our July 2022 webinar series, Rescuing Mother Earth. And before we get started and give some time for folks to be able to join, if you can, in the chat window, go ahead and tell us where you're coming from. We'd really like to know what parts of the world we have folks attending this webinar. I already see that we've got quite an international crowd all over. Wow, it's streaming so fast, I'm having a hard time actually just picking out names. But it looks like so far we've hit almost every continent, which is fantastic. I expect that we'll have quite a crowd today. That's great to see everybody joining. All right.
Yeah, definitely all over the world coming in and
Yep.
joining with this program. So this is great news.
Yeah, we're getting such good worldwide reach now, which is fantastic. It's what we need.
Yep.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. So this is webinar 3 in our July webinar series, and we're calling this the main event. We've got some special guests, John D. Liu and Sadhguru, joining us today with Dr. Elaine Ingham. And just a reminder, we have already had 2 webinars. Webinar 1, which was how to accelerate soil and ecosystem restoration, and webinar 2, which was ecosystem restoration examples. And you can find the recordings of those. So if you missed webinar 1 or 2 or both, I definitely recommend going back and watching those webinars. They were fantastic. And then we also have webinar 4 coming up, which is how you can impact your ecosystem, careers in ecosystem restoration and regenerative ag. And that's going to be Thursday, July 28th at 7 p.m. London time or 11 a.m. Pacific time. Okay, just some rules of engagement for our webinar that we'll have the participants in muted mode for the duration of the webinar, just to make sure we don't have any kind of background noise. It'll just be the panelists and myself having live feeds for today. And then we also definitely want to make this an interactive session for you folks. So if you have questions for our panelists as we go through the presentation, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A section. And I have a slide that will talk exactly what button to press for that. We also want to have a lively discussion in chat. We typically do. So there's also a chat button in Zoom. And if you want to just have a discussion with other folks that are attending today's webinar, feel free to have a discussion in the chat window. And always, we want you to enjoy the webinar. So let's talk about what we're going to cover today. So we're quickly going to run through introductions, and then I'm going to hand it over to Sadhguru to talk about the Save Soil movement. And then we'll hear from John D. Liu about ecosystem restoration camps. And then we'll hear from Dr. Elaine Ingham about the Soil Food Web. And then we'll have a brief Q&A session so that we can hear some of your thoughts or your questions, to the panelist team. At the top of the hour, Sadhguru will be leaving us, and then we will move into how we can impact the Ecosystem Restoration Bundle. That's our July promotion from the Soil Food Web School. And then we'll do another Q&A session at the end of that. And we're expecting about 2 hours total time for today. And let's talk about today's panelists. So we're very excited to have Sadhguru with us. He's a yogi, spiritual leader, best-selling author of The Conscious Planet, Save Soil Movement, represented out of Tennessee, USA. And then we've got John D. Liu, filmmaker, ecologist, founder of Ecosystem Restoration Camps out of New Mexico. And then we've got Dr. Elaine Ingham, microbiologist and founder of the Soil Food Web School out of Oregon. And then myself, I'm a Soil Food Web consultant. I own a company called Sprouting Soil, and I'm also out of Oregon. Okay, and just as a reminder for those that want to be able to ask questions, please go ahead and use the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And we talked about the chat. If you want to just have a general discussion, then you would click on the chat button. Okay, so we're going to hear from Sadhguru, and I want to give a little bit of an introduction. So Sadhguru is a yogi, mystic, best-selling author, a speaker of international renown, and one of the world's most influential voices on ecology. He's been conferred Padma Vibhushan, India's highest annual civilian award, recorded for exceptional and distinguished service. He is the initiator of the world's largest people's movement, Save Soil. Sadhguru recently concluded an arduous 3,000-kilometer journey across 27 nations, spanning 100 days, as a lone motorcyclist across Europe, Central Asia, and the Middle East and India. And this mammoth movement ignited 3.9 billion people's concerns for soil and created an urgency in governments around the world to implement soil revitalization policies. Welcome, Sadhguru. Can you please share an overview of the Save Soil movement and its impact so far and where it's going next?
Namaskaram and good morning to everybody. I have been talking about soil for last 30 years and I've spoken to various agricultural ministries around the world, spoken to ministers, some heads of state, lots of bureaucrats, scientists. Well, I always see when I speak about this, they say, Sadhguru, this is great, this is very important, what you're saying is really, really crucial, fantastic, and they sleep on it. So, I've seen that soil talk is a good pillow to sleep on. So, people have been sleeping on it and it's never even became part of the narrative of big talk about climate change and global warming. When soil or exposed soils or degenerated soils account for nearly 36 to 40% of global warming and climate change source, it is never even mentioned. International conventions happen without uttering the word soil. For whatever reasons, I don't want to get into the politics of it. But this has been a deep concern to me. So I've been seeing what we can do to awaken the world, at least to shift the narrative towards soil, because this is how human societies function. First we think about it, then we talk about it, then we invest our emotions in it, and then action will come forth. In democratic nations, action is a very, very slow process because you have to convince everybody before you do something simple which is absolutely necessary. So, I thought we need to do something and then as I traveled in the last 2.5 years and met many agriculture ministries and various government agencies, what I found was almost everybody who is in responsible positions knew that there is a serious problem, that we are now talking about soil extinction. And everybody generally knows what is the direction of the solution. But it looked like everybody knows the problem, everybody knows the solution, so what is the issue? Why are we not doing anything about it? Then I realized that they're all waiting for an idiot to come by and bell the cat. So I thought, here I am, what's my problem? I got nothing to lose, nothing to gain from anything that I do. So I thought we need to do something. As I realized we've been talking for so long and nobody wakes up on it, so I thought I need to do something dramatic which risks my life. Anybody whoever introduced, they said 3,000-kilometer ride. No, it is 30,000-kilometer ride. 100 days, 30,000 kilometers, 697 events that I did in these 100 days. It was an insane journey. I knew people won't wake up because I don't hold any positions, I'm not a minister, I don't hold any position either in an organization or in a government or whatever, there's no positions of power. So the only thing I have is people's love and goodwill, so I thought I'll play with that. And I know that that will really become hyperactive only when I put myself to risk. And well, there was tremendous risk, all kinds of terrains and weather conditions, and 100 days on road and doing nearly 700 events. There is enormous amount of risk. I'm 65 years of age, I could have killed myself. When people realized Sadhguru is trying to kill himself, everybody woke up and millions of people started tweeting, talking about it, which in the end, on June 23rd, according to metrics provided by some agencies, it shows that we have reached 3.91 billion people, which is a substantial number to awaken the governments. But right now, I have commitments from 78 or 79 nations, and almost all states in India have unequivocally committed. But now what I see is, in India, where both the central government and the state governments are committed and express their commitments openly, when I talk to the decision-making process and getting it on the ground, it looks like it'll take 2.5 to 3 years. that is too much time for me. I don't think we have to waste 2 to 3 years before we get into action. Action needs to happen now. As a part of this, now in the next week, I'm in Caribbean and in some South American countries to initiate this action on the ground. So I have recognized or identified 132 nations as small nations. When I say small nations, these are nations, either they don't have the scientific wherewithal or organizational wherewithal or maybe financial wherewithal to implement these things. So we are forming committees. I would welcome any one of you who is willing to be part of this, forming scientific committees so that we can handhold these small nations towards enhancing organic content or organic matter. The Save Soil movement is focused on just one thing, because when soil has to be regenerated or revived, scientists cannot do it, academics cannot do it. It is only the farmer who has to do it in the end. So it's very important, it's a one-point agenda, that there are no too many complex aspects involved in it. And it's also very important that it does not run into the headwinds of interested industries, businesses and other lobbies, which may lose by doing something. So this is focused essentially on enhancing organic content. Why is it focused like this is because right now the most important thing is the loss of biodiversity in the agricultural soils, which is the largest piece of geography on the planet, nearly 64%, according to various data. So 64% of the Earth's land is right now being plowed, and this land is degenerating simply because on our farms there is no source of organic content. As there are only two sources of organic content on this planet or anywhere in the known universe, which is plant life and animal life. Today our farms are just completely plowed for miles and miles. All that traverses these farms are just machines, and anything that moves other than a machine, we kill them with herbicide, weedicide, insecticide and every other kind, which is leading to farmer suicide. Unfortunately, it's going that way. The largest number of suicides in any given profession, unfortunately, is among the farming community across the world. Over 500,000 farmers have committed suicide in the last 25 years all over the world. So having said this, putting back organic content means the source of organic content should be on the farm. It should be in the form of trees or other vegetation or animals or whichever way, it has to go back on the farm. Right now, there is no source of organic content. Once the organic content is not there, then the microorganisms start dying. Right now, according to UNFAO, 27,000 species of organisms are going extinct per year. At this rate, in another 25 to 40 years' time, we will reach a place where this slide which is happening right now will go into a tumble. Once it goes into a tumble, there is nothing that we can do. Before we reach this place, we need to act. Putting back organic content into the soil is most important because this is measurable at the farm level. If you talk about carbon, soil carbon, then to test this, it has to go to the laboratory. If it has to go to the laboratory, it will just not happen on the scale that it needs to happen. It needs to be tested on the farm, and it has to be incentive-driven, that government should provide incentive as a next level carbon credit market should become friendly to farms and farmer kind of setup, because right now it is all structured around industry and business. Last 7 years, I've been trying to get carbon credits for our farmers, hundreds and thousands of them. We've not moved an inch. It just looks like a maze that you can't get through. So right now we are working on that. That is a second level of incentive. Another thing is, wherever you go in the marketplace today, it has become fashionable. They shove fruits and vegetables in your face and they say, this is organic. I keep asking them, can you give me an inorganic one? Well, there is no such thing. So, organic has just become a marketing jargon, it doesn't define anything. It's time we define this, whether it comes from soils which hold 1% organic content. The average minimum 3% is needed for you to call soil as soil. 3% is not the ideal, it is the most minimum. But that is not present as an average even in a single country in the entire world, unfortunately. So if you set up an incentive, if you get it to 3%, you will get this much incentive, and then carbon credits and market recognition in the sense fruits, vegetables and grains and whatever other food that we manufacture, the produce, must have this clear definition that this food comes from 3%, 4%, 6%, 10%, whatever is the organic content. Because for this we have a science, if it comes from 3% organic content, what are the micronutrients that could be present there? What are the health benefits? What are the preventive health benefits? What are the benefits in terms of lack of, loss of mandates prevented and general, healthcare systems not being stressed and happy and healthy populations, what productivity, the entire data is there, we just have to correlate this. So in the marketplace, it must be clearly identified what kind of farm is it coming from, what kind of soils has it been grown upon. If these three incentives are set up, definitely in the next 6 to 8 years' time, we could see a significant increase in organic content and microbial activity, which is the essential theme and focus of Save Soil movement. Right now, we are working with various governments to see that it gets on the ground. But as I said, 79 nations have already signed up and want to go. They're very eager to go ahead, and India is very, very eager to go ahead. But as I also said, I'm repeating this, that though they're very eager to go ahead, it looks like they will take 2.5 to 3 years to put it on the ground. So I'm trying to hasten this by seeing if private agencies can provide at least 50% of the incentive that a farmer would need, so that the government would be incentivized to provide the remaining 50% and go right now, this year, or at least by the beginning of next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Sadhguru. Very inspirational words. Okay, we're gonna move to John. And John, let me get this set up here. Okay, John D. Liu, you're gonna talk about ecosystem restoration camps.
Yes, Brian, thank you so much. And thank you, Sadhguru, for all that you're doing and you have done. And if I can help in any way, please let me know. So I'm going to talk about the ecosystem restoration camps. This is a movement which began about now almost 5.5, 6 years ago. And I was having dreams because I'd been studying and documenting and communicating about restoration for quite a long time. And I wasn't sure if anybody was listening. So as Sadhguru was saying, it seems to take a very long time for these messages to reach and for governments to do what they need to do. Some practical outcomes in Rwanda and Ethiopia. And of course, the main part of my study early on was in the upper and middle reaches of the Yellow River in China, where they restored the Loess Plateau. And that's where it was clear that it's possible to rehabilitate large-scale damaged ecosystems, and that this is connected to the percentages and total amounts of biodiversity, biomass, and accumulated organic matter. And I would just throw out a term for a moment so you can start considering it: necromass. So biomass is living material and necromass is dead organic material. So the necromass in the soils are feeding the microbial communities and the fungal communities and are part of the habitat in the pedosphere. So when I started having these dreams, I was dreaming that people were waking up in camps and they were going camping, but they were also restoring the earth. They were planting out forests and they were doing regenerative agriculture and they were eating together and working together. And my father had always told me that I was a bit of a dreamer. So I kind of shook my head and thought, well, I don't know about this. Who's listening to me anyway? And but I kept having the dream. So I wrote about this in Permaculture Magazine. It's an essay. You can find it now. It's called Earth Restoration Peace Camps in Permaculture Magazine. And when I wrote this essay, I stopped having the dream, which was kind of convenient because I kept waking up with the dream. But then thousands and then tens of thousands of people said, well, we're having the same dream, or we want that. And so when that happened, I realized that there were people who were willing to start immediately and work together. So in the first year, in 2016, we started one camp in Spain, in the Altiplano. In the second year, 2017, we worked together with a partner, Via Organica, in San Miguel de Allende, and made the second camp. In the third year, there were 21 camps. In the fourth year, there were 37 camps. At the end of 2021, there were 50 camps, and there are 56 camps now, and there might be 75, maybe even more by the end of the year. So what's interesting about these is that we don't need to wait for policy or government. We can choose this ourselves. And it's interesting, each of the camps can become living laboratories where they're learning all about soil, they're learning all about water, they're learning all about plants and biodiversity. And so they can be living laboratories, they can be botanical sanctuaries, and they can become water retention landscapes. There's something very, very important is happening now all over the world, is this massive drought, ongoing drought. And what we can do is realize that if you expose the soils to direct sunlight, you're increasing the solar radiation, and you're increasing the temperature on the surface of the Earth by a tremendous amount. Possibly 10 to 15 degrees centigrade is not difficult to find. And I have found 45 degrees centigrade differences between exposed soils and underneath a vegetative canopy. Now that is an outlier because it's in the Taklamakan, a desert, which means you go in, but you don't out. So what's interesting is that these camps allow us to engage more and more people. And what we're doing is we're empowering people, because we're giving away our sovereignty if we expect the governments and the experts, the academics and the corporations to do this. And as Satguru said, it's the farmers, it's the people who really have the ability. And I, at some point in the last three decades that I've been working on this, I realized the only agency that's capable of doing this is humanity. We have to make restoration of ecological function the central intention of human civilization. And we have to realize that that is the basis of any economy, that everything else is a derivative that comes from healthy, functional ecosystems. So the economic arguments are false now because everything comes from functional ecosystems. Now, we can have education, we can have action, and we can have communities within the ecosystem restoration camps. And we can engage groups that are now disenfranchised, like refugees or the homeless or the hungry. So there's many possibilities with these camps. And I hope that you'll consider how you can work with the camps, because when the camp started, we said, well, how should we do this? Shall we go and beg for money and capital from different organizations, the traditional capital formations? Or should we all share? And what we found out was people who shared 10 euros per month, that would be 120 euros per year. If we got 1 million people to do that, that would be 120 million euros. That would immediately propel the ecosystem restoration camps movement to the top of the restoration game. So the people have the opportunity to do this. So please put that slide back up with the URL for the ecosystem restoration camps movement. And if you can, then go and become a supporting member, because the ecosystem restoration camps movement belongs to you and belongs to all of the people. And then if you don't have any money, or even if you do become a supporting member, go camping, go join the activities in the camp, learn how to grow soils, learn how to plant trees, learn how to do regenerative agriculture. And if you're really ambitious, I'm right now in Taos, New Mexico, where a person wants to create a new camp. And this is a large ranch, and it is a little degraded from a cattle ranching over a long period of time. So there's a lot of upside to restore this, and we can restore the hydrology, we can restore the soils, and we can restore the biodiversity. So all of those are happening. Become a member, own it, own the ecosystem restoration camps movement. It belongs to you. And thanks so much for listening to me, and I'll be here to answer questions in a bit. Thanks so much.
Thank you, John. Okay, we'll move on to Dr. Elaine Ingham. Elaine, take it away.
Okay. I'm so interested in what the previous two speakers talked about, and now how do I manage to pull together all of those ideas and combine them with the knowledge that we have about the biology in the soil. And this is a picture of the soil food web, where we're following energy or carbon or any nutrient that you want to talk about moving through this system and moving back to the plant and improving the productivity of that plant. Right now, we are not consuming foods in our the produce that we eat from chemically agricultural farms, because the problems of getting this nutrient back into the plant. We have to do what Mother Nature has done all along. We have to stop killing things. Every time you see organism, anything walking around on the leaves of your plants, and you go, ooh, gotta kill it. That's the mindset that the chemical world has imposed upon us. And it's just absolutely not true that everything you're going to run into in your agricultural system is going to be a pest or a problem organism, a disease. You have to learn to identify who are the good guys and who are the bad guys. And so at the Soil Food Web School, we teach people how to understand the role and function of all these organisms in the soil, and how your plant is benefited by having this complex food web present in your soil. Now, we don't need to go to genus species level to figure out what nature is doing. We need only go to perhaps a class and order level. And so we teach you what all these different organisms in the soil look like and what their roles and their functions are, so that you can rehabilitate your dirt and turn it back into soil. Most people don't understand that there is a difference between dirt and soil. And as defined by one of the fathers of soil science, Hans Jenny, he pointed out that if we're talking about dirt, that's just the mineral components in that dirt. That's all pretty much that you have, along with perhaps a few bacterial species and typically bacterial species that you do not want to have in your dirt because they cause disease, they are parasites, they are problem organisms. So how do you now get back into your soil this nice set of bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes, all of those things in this picture? How do they function and work together? So we're going to teach you how to use a microscope so you can identify for yourself what's in your soil. Well, what is soil exactly? I talked about dirt. Now let's go on to the definition of soil. According to Hans Jenny, you have to have organic matter in your soil, and you want that organic matter to be as high as you can possibly get it. There are places where we grow massively abundant crops where we're dealing with only organic carbon in that soil. So deep, thick, rich layer of decomposed organic material being utilized by your plant using all of these organisms in that soil. So you're getting maximum potential benefit. The DNA is going to work to the maximum amount possible that get the highest level of nutrients in that food. So not only do you need to have the organic matter in your soil, you need to have these organisms. And the biggest fear that we have really is that we're going to be losing massive numbers of these species of organisms with the management that we're practicing as human beings on this planet. So the Sadhguru hit the problem right on the head. We've got to make certain that we have places where we retain all these beneficial organisms so that come the day some farmer walks in the door and says, I want to convert over. I want to start doing things according to what Mother Nature has put together in this system. What is the system exactly? How much of each one of these organisms do you need to have in your soil? Because it's not the same all the way through succession. And so as your property goes from not growing any plants because nutrient cycling isn't present, these organisms aren't there to do their jobs because there's no food to feed them. How odd that these organisms would need to be fed. So we've got to get that organic matter back into the soil. So now you start growing weeds. Well, if that's not the ecosystem that you want, you better learn how to increase the fungal component in the soil. And so we're looking at that fungal, in the second trophic level, the second area down, fungi. You've got to start improving that fungal biomass in the soil. While these organisms are building that organic matter, so your plant has more food stored in the soil that it can get hold of because the bacteria and fungi, protozoa and nematodes are there. We've also got to think about the benefits, other benefits that these organisms provide for your plant. If you would like to hold most of your water in your soil and not have it leach out and run off with most of your soluble nutrients into the rivers and lakes and streams and destroying water quality so that we can't drink that water, we need to hold all those nutrients in the soil. Well, how do you do that? Well, you've got to have the ability to store water as well as these nutrients. And how do we do that? You've got to get the bacteria making the microaggregates, the beneficial bacteria making microaggregates. You've got to have the fungi putting their strands out and wrapping these microaggregates together so that you can hold massive amounts of water and nutrients in that soil in a way that will very rapidly become available to your plant if your plant puts out the information to tell these microorganisms what the plant needs, and those organisms pull those nutrients into their bodies. And then you have to have the predators, which is this third group in your I just realized I'm not annotated, so I better get that out there so you can see what I'm talking about. The third trophic level here, we've got to have these organisms present, so they will eat their prey, the fungi and the bacteria, and that's what releases the nutrients from the bacteria and the fungi and converts those releases those nutrients in a plant available form right there in the root system. We don't have to put up diffusion gradients back to your plant and hope that nothing interferes with that flow over a couple of feet worth of soil. Mother Nature has figured out how to get those nutrients into the root system first, because the plant is feeding the bacteria and fungi. The bacteria and fungi go out and collect the nutrients that the plant wants. And then when the bacteria and fungi are eaten by their predators, that releases the nutrients that are what the plant wants to take up. It's in the proper form. And there's where we see that you want to have ammonium-dominated food webs and not nitrate-dominated food webs present in your soil, where you're trying to grow healthy plant material for us to consume. Nature figured out this nutrient cycling system. She figured out how to hold water in your soil and keep it there, and so that in that dry summer period that the plants need, because they want to ripen the seeds, but you still have to have water. How do you do that? You've got to build structure in the soil, so you've held the water, and the root systems can go down as deep as they need to get the water that they require. Well, why doesn't your root system go down as deep as possible in agricultural, chemically performed agriculture? It's because the inorganic fertilizers kill the organisms in the soil. The pesticides, the fungicides, nematicides, the insecticides are all killing agents, and most of them are in large part sterilants. They kill everything in your soil except for a few of the disease-causing organisms. They've become resistant. So how do we go back and start running this system the way nature meant it to work? This system has existed on this planet for more than 1 billion years. Plants with roots came upon this system already intact and functioning. There didn't have to be something new and original and different. So none of the plants come with a nutrient cycling system in place, because this is supposed to already be there. And how much does it cost to get these organisms back into your soil? You make your own compost. You make your own mix of the organisms that need to be present in your different agricultural systems. We just have to train you to understand what those different food webs look like, depending on whether you want to grow onions or you want to grow tomatoes, or you want to grow berries, or you want to grow orchard systems. So I could go on and on and on for literally weeks at a time, talking about all these things and how they all merge together, and how do you figure out what is present in your soil? You've got to have a microscope. And so we teach you how to use relatively inexpensive microscopes and teach you how to get pictures of your organisms so you can monitor and make sure that you're taking the right steps to work with nature instead of against her. So thank you for listening. Certainly hope that you'll all be interested in coming to the Soil Food Web and start taking some of the courses.
Thank you, Elaine. Okay, let's go ahead. We've got, an amazing amount of questions have been posted in the Q&A section. So let's jump right to it, because I know there's a lot of questions that folks want us to be able to get to. So the first question is from Braxton, and Braxton says, How do you counter the argument that there's too much to change in man's world and it's too late on focusing on to save the planet from climate change, and that we need to focus on reduced losses of our current socioeconomic global system? What say you, panelists?
Can I chat on this one for a minute?
Sure.
But this guy is, that argument that's coming from, it's just too late to do anything, and we might just gracefully lie down and die because you die now or you die later. That just seems utterly ridiculous. We need to stop using poisons to try to grow our plants. We've got to put the biology back into the system. And how rapidly could we convert from the system that we have now? How could we get all these, the carbon back into the soil? How can we get the right sets of organisms? It takes you 1 year, one growing season, doing things the right way. And that's what we teach you to do at Soil Food Web Incorporated, no matter where you are on the planet and exactly the different climates and foods that you want to be growing. We teach you how to do that conversion. And in your first growing season, typically you will see decreased costs and increased dollars pouring into your pocket because you have more food at a higher level of quality. You don't have to work so hard after that first year of engagement, because once you get these organisms established in your soil, you don't have to be out there working so hard to get the organisms back into the system. Oh, you'll fine tune a little bit, but that's easy to do, relatively speaking, once you've gone the big major step of never again using a toxic material to try to manage your ecosystem. So, yep, come and start the foundation courses with us so that you can perhaps one day become a consultant and start helping all your neighbors do this process.
Great. Sadhguru?
Yes, namaskaram, if I can say something. Well, when we talk about this, and there are many aspects, one of the aspects that Ellen mentioned is how water holding capacity of the soil goes up tremendously as the organic content or matter goes up also. What we have found practically on ground with hundreds and thousands of farmers we've well manifested is, if you raise the organic content to 8 to 12%, your irrigation requirement will come down to 30% of what it is right now. Right now, there is predictions that by 2032, 3.5 billion people will be water stressed on this planet, and because of this, it could stimulate 1.3 billion people migrating across the world. When people migrate, forced migrations and unplanned migrations, the worst will happen to the women and children on this planet, always. So, pushing people into such large-scale migration, the main reason is they're not able to grow their own food and there is not enough water where they live, so they naturally try to move somewhere. So about this argument, isn't it too late, why don't we just let it be? Because this is not going to be pleasant. People ask me, Sadhguru, all these facts, when you look at it, is the world going to end? So I tell them, this is the problem, the world is not going to end. If it's going to end, then what's the problem? All problems are over. The problem is, it's a slow fade. It's the most torturous thing that can happen is famines bursting out all over the world. Out of that, civil unrest that happens. It is predicted by 2035 there could be dozens of civil wars across the world, mainly because of food and water shortages. So already it's happening in Africa, it's manifesting this year. About 6 nations are going into famine. So if whoever asking this question does not understand this, I want them to know that famine is the most horrible way for a human being to die, because a war is much better, at least a bullet in your head is done thing. This is like 3 to 4 months of slow fade, where you're willing to cut your own limbs and eat them up. That is the kind of things that happen in famine conditions. People chop off their own children's limbs and eat them. Such things have happened in the world. You don't want to drive humanity in that direction once again. So this defeatist mentality is not needed. Even if we take minimum measures means just cover crops in the seasons when the land is not being used. If you do this, we have found in 4 to 6 years, what was less than 1% will become more than 3% effortlessly, without any investment. If you are willing to spend some money on it, 12 to 18 months, you can turn around most of the lands on the planet. I would say at least 60% of the land on the agricultural lands on the planet can be turned around in 12 to 18 months if we are willing to invest a certain amount of attention and maybe certain amount of finance. If that is not possible, in 4 to 6 years, maximum 8 years' time, almost all land can be revived just with knowledge, no need for money. Just with policy and a little bit of a push, it can happen. A little incentive is needed because farmers or the farm economy right now on the planet is so fragile. If you try to make any changes, it may just collapse. So, little bit of incentive so that farmers go for it willingly rather than as an enforcement method. So, because enforcement will not work on such a large scale, it has to be incentive-based. So, I want to tell this young man, whoever he is, that right now, as I said earlier, the biodiversity loss is happening at a certain level, that it's a steep slide. When this slide goes into a tumble, then you will reach this argument. Can we really do something? Then the option only may be that 10, 20, 30% of the population will have to die. Don't drive that in that direction, because that's not the place to go. That defies all humanity within ourselves.
Thank you. John, anything you'd like to add? Oh, you're on mute, John.
I would just say that the ecology is the economy. We have made this mistake in things, and these things are not what protects our life. There are life support systems on the planet, and they are air and water and fertile soils and biodiversity. And so we need to understand that, and everything else is not as important. And so we've made this inversion. If we invert the economy, and the central intention of human civilization is to restore all degraded lands on the earth, then we can't fail, because human beings are quite clever and industrious. And then you can make money by restoring the ecology. Now you make money by destroying the ecology. We have to change that. So if you change from making money from destroying, and you can't make any money by destroying, you can only make money from restoring, we're good.
Right now, John, what you're saying is like somebody wants to pull out the foundation stones to build a superstructure. That's exactly what we're doing.
I'm sorry?
Someone is pulling out the foundation stones of a building to build a superstructure.
Yeah.
Exactly. That was a great question, Braxton. All right, let's go ahead and move to another question. This question is from Danielle. And Danielle asks, all this information is available to everyone. What will it take to get it to everyone? We are so entrenched in our thinking, digging trenches in our gardens. What do we collectively need to do to break through the cultural barrier so that this becomes the new normal for soil and agriculture?
Can I say, please?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Sadhguru.
So we need to understand this. See, right now, wherever I go, wherever I speak, anywhere in the world, Sadhguru, what can I do? After talking to them, see, the most important thing is to get the policy change. They'll say, what can I do? What can I do? What they're asking is, they're eager to roll up their sleeves and go and fix their kitchen garden. You fixing your kitchen garden is very cute, but it's not a solution, because the problem is on the agricultural lands. You producing a little bit of organically rich vegetables or fruit for yourself is not the thing. There are 8 billion people that you have to feed on this planet. So that is a challenge which has taken us in this direction. Why we have driven ourselves into the industrial type of farming is in our eagerness to feed these 8 billion people, and 8 billion people are not eating the food of 8 billion people alone, they are actually consuming nearly 24 billion people how much they could consume. That much food we are consuming, not necessarily going into our ingestion process, but it is going into the animals that we eat and so many other ways. So actually, we are producing enough food for over 20 billion people right now. But out of this 8 billion, nearly 20% are, malnourished, or more than 20% is malnourished. So this is happening essentially because our policies are such. Our policies are market-oriented, not human-oriented. We are treating human beings as a marketplace. Human beings are not a marketplace. Yes, there is a marketplace to operate. That's a different aspect. As John pointed out, it's upside down. That's one aspect. That's not going to be fixed right now. For immediate action, the most important thing that the citizens of the world can do is raise your voice, because in a democracy, that is most important. You taking physical action by yourself is wonderful of you, but it's not a solution. It is important. Incentive-based policies to fix the land and fix the soil comes forth in every nation. This needs to happen.
Elaine, John, any other thoughts?
Well, I would say, not to agree with Sadhguru, but I think that every individual has a role to play.
I think John's having some internet difficulties.
Oh. No, we're not denying the role to play, John. What I'm saying is, the main role for a citizen in a democratic nation is that you are the one who is supposed to run the government. It's not that you cast your vote once in 4 years and your job is done.
We need to.
I think we're getting some delay there. So John, Sadhguru was just responding back to one of your statements. But we'll have Sadhguru kind of finish his thought, and then we'll jump back to you, John.
No, what I'm saying is, when
Sorry.
we say every individual has a
I
role,
just-
I'm sorry, John, would you like to continue? I'll just finish one sentence, okay. See, every individual has a role, definitely, but in a democratic nation, we must understand as citizens, we are supposed to run the government, not just cast our vote once in 3, 4 or 5 years and be done with it. So this is what I'm talking about. Right now, democratically elected nations, the voice of the citizen is most important, because governments are elected for 4-year terms. Now you're asking them to do something which may bear fruit after 12 years or 15 years. Why would they do that? So if they have to do it, at least 60% of the adult population in the country must stand up and say, we are concerned about our future, the future of this nation, future of our children. This needs to be expressed. Unfortunately, it's never been expressed. It's time to do that and keep that tempo up. Once 60% of the population speaks and continues to speak about something, no democratically elected leader will ever ignore that.
And John, I know you had some bad internet there. Did you want to conclude your thought?
Well, I think that, policy has to change, but I've been working on this for 3 decades, and they just keep having these giant meetings, and it doesn't really do very much. So it's very satisfying when you see a stream come back, or you see, you feel the moisture and subtle changes when you have a food forest or something like that. So these are the things that we can all do. And when more and more people do that, and as these situations get worse and worse, I think everyone is going to be obligated to work on this. And when we do that, we are shifting ultimately policy, and that's correct. Policy must change.
Yeah, and I think, we all have a voice, and the more informed our voice becomes, the more impact and power that we have to be able to change things and change minds as well. Okay, well, we're getting kind of to the top of the hour, and I know, Sadhguru, you have other engagements. Is there anything that you'd like to have as kind of a closing statement before we move on to the rest of our webinar?
Yes, I would like to just state, like how, what kind of effort and time duration it takes to change policy. For example, last 27 years, we've been working with farmers, and about 130,000 farmers have fully converted their lands into what is called as tree-based agriculture, with which the organic content in the soil has gone up significantly. They're sequestering substantial amount of carbon dioxide, and nutritional value in the food is enhanced. Above all, farmer's economy, individual economy of the farmer has gone up anywhere between 300 to 800% in 7 to 8 years' time. This is a 27-year-old project. Based on this, now we are working on a river basin, which is 83,000 square kilometers in the southern India. It's called Kaveri River. This project is called Kaveri Calling, where 83,000 square kilometers, 5.2 million farmers live and work here. Looking at the success of this project on the ground, we made this policy changes where a farmer plants a tree in his land, not as just afforestation, this is tree-based agriculture. There is a whole science to it, how to make use of the tree to grow your crops within that. You can even grow paddy along with the trees, just pruning it at the right time. When the paddy doesn't need sunlight throughout, you can prune the trees and use that material to churn it back into the soil. By these methods, the nutritional value goes up significantly, farmers' income has gone up significantly. Based on this, 9 UN agencies right now are with us as partners. Based on this, the central government of India looked at the success of this project and they made 13 detailed project reports for 13 river basins. Now, we've been pushing for that action for some time now, and just now when I was riding through Europe, I got the information. They allocated $2.4 billion as a budget for these 13 river basins. If this kind of budget goes in for another 8 to 10 years' time, 67% of India's soil would be above the crest. This is what needs to happen. But I must tell you, this took me over 11 years to get these policy changes and get money allocated into the policy. It should not take that kind of time. Now it should happen very quickly. Otherwise, it could be too late, as that young man said. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Sadhguru. It was an honor to have you here and impart your
Thank
wisdom.
you, all of you, John, yourself, and Dr. Elaine. Thank you very much. Hope to catch up with you all sometime. Namaskaram. We have this choice. Either we come together for soil, or one day anyway we will come together in the soil.
That's true. Such a good saying. Okay, all right, we're going to go ahead and move along to talking about our July promotion. It was great to have Sadhguru on, and what a great discussion. But let's go ahead and talk about our new partnership between Dr. Elaine's Soil Food Web School and the Ecosystem Restoration Camps. So we're going to play a short video, probably 4 or 5 minutes, talking about our July promotion and also the partnership that we have with the Eco Restoration Camps. So let me go ahead and get this video started.
If you are looking for a way to make a big, positive impact on the environment, the Ecosystem Restoration Bundle could be for you. Whether you're a farmer or agricultural professional looking for a way to transition to regenerative ag without harming profits, or someone looking for an impactful new career as a soil food web consultant, lab tech, or compost producer, or if you're someone who is really passionate about ecosystem restoration, this bundle has a lot to offer you. We've put together 4 really powerful tools that will set you up for success, enabling you to make an impact on the soils and ecosystems in your part of the world.
Tool number 1, the Soil Food Web Foundation courses.
This is where you'll learn all about how soil functions on a biological level. You'll understand what the 4 key groups of microorganisms are and how they work together with plants, nurturing and protecting them. You'll learn how to make biological compost and liquid soil amendments and how to apply them to soil so that the soil biome can be rapidly restored to health. These are all great skills to have at your disposal if you are working on regenerating farmland or an ecosystem restoration project, as repairing the soil biome will dramatically accelerate the regeneration process so you can start to see the results in the first growing season.
Tool number 2. The Introduction to Ecosystem Restoration. This is where you'll study ecological principles and ecosystem restoration techniques. This course will prepare you to make a meaningful contribution to any ecosystem restoration camp where people are coming together to restore their landscapes. Please take a look at the Pathways video for more information on this. This is a great tool to have in your box if you are a soil food web consultant working with farmers to support their transition to regenerative agriculture, because it will empower you to have a positive effect on the wider ecosystem beyond the soil biome and cropland. You'll be able to have a positive impact on streams and rivers, on woodlands, and on the animals that occupy the local area too.
Tool number 3, the Certified Lab Tech Program. This is an intensive 3-month program designed to help you to master Dr. Lane's microscopy technique. You'll work one-on-one with a microscopy mentor in 8 one-hour sessions. This is such a powerful tool because it enables you to measure the success of various techniques that you might be experimenting with on your own ecosystem restoration project or farm. You will be able to see how the soil biome responds in weeks, way before you start to see above-ground responses to the strategies you are using. And you'll be able to assess the quality of your compost and liquid amendments, so you'll know how impactful they could be before you put in the effort of applying them to the soil. This is kind of like having X-ray vision that enables you to see what's happening beneath the surface of the soil. It's a real superpower.
Tool number 4, the Introduction to Permaculture. Permaculture is a regenerative design approach that can be applied to just about anything, from water management, growing systems, dwellings, and much more. This is another great tool to have in your box, as permaculture principles can add tons of value to any project. This July, with the Ecosystem Restoration Bundle, you can register for the Soil Food Web Foundation courses for just $3,800, saving $1,200, and you'll get these other 3 powerful tools absolutely free, saving a total of $3,800 off. That's an incredible savings of 50% off the total bundle value, which is $7,600.
We're putting these 4 amazing tools together because we really want to set our students up for success. Whether you're a farmer looking to transition to regenerative ag while having a positive impact on the wider ecosystem, a budding soil food web professional, or someone who wants to dedicate themselves to the cause of ecosystem restoration, these 4 tools combined will give you a great foundation. Come join the soil revolution today and be a part of the Soil-lution.
I had you on mute. Okay, we're going to move on to a Q&A session, and this will conclude the rest of our webinar. So if you've got questions for the panelists, go ahead and please use that Q&A button and go ahead and post your questions in there. And we're going to start with a question from Rapina, and the question is, so much of food coming from other countries still, and we have vast amounts of land here that can be used to grow food for us citizens at least. How do we change that? So Elaine, John?
I guess we need to get people educated. You know, it doesn't have to be really high level science that we're teaching them, but get them to understand that we don't need to be importing food from outside of the country. Maybe there has to, some understanding of you can't have strawberries year round. That is not a healthy way to run your ecosystems, trying to produce strawberries when it's not strawberry season. We can still have greenhouses, so maybe some of that market doesn't have to disappear. But we've got to get the biology into the soil so the toxic chemicals especially are not necessary. The tillage is not a practice that we approve because you're basically destroying the habitat for the microorganisms in that soil. You're killing the very things that you need to have in order to have water for your plants later in the growing season. We want the organisms to be able to move in the soil, find the nutrients that your plant needs, bring those nutrients back to your plant. So I guess I would, kind of end it on that and hand it over to John.
I think I would recommend that people start to consider the difference between perennials and annuals. what I've noticed is that the most biodiverse and the functional systems are really perennial systems. They're multi-layered. So there are different crops, if you think of it as crops, that are in a high canopy and in the middle level and at the ground. And there's plenty of different stylistic ways you can do things with syntropic agriculture, but food forests. There's a really good one in the Netherlands. Wouter van Echt made a food forest called Kettelbrug. You can find it. Just I'll put it in the chat. But it's so interesting to see how productive it is, and that will be functional and productive. So you can eat every day from that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think the, eat local, eat seasonal, the more that becomes ingrained in, the cultures around the world. And I think you go back 100 years, that was the way people ate. And only because of globalization that we've now got it where you can get strawberries year round or melons, but does that make it the right thing to do? No, I mean, it really, I think, is causing more harm. It's that extraction kind of behavior versus regenerative behavior, for sure. Okay, let's move on to another question. So this question is, I'll go back, sorry. And this question is, there seems to be this misconception that organic farming cannot sustain the world with sufficient food. Only industrial farming can. What do you think is the path for regenerative agriculture to combat this idea that seemed to be dominating agriculture and environmental economics?
Well, if we look at a lot of the studies that we've already done at Soil Food Web, we actually increase yields quite easily in the first growing season of this transition, where you maybe don't have all of the parts together yet, but still, because you're getting the bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes balanced properly in your soil so that you can maximize production, you're growing more food than they're capable of growing in the toxic chemical approach. Yeah, so I think it's an absolute, it's a play by the inorganic world to try to convince folks that their products should not be declared outlaws. You're destroying the very system that supports humanity when you start poisoning it. It's just not logical, it's not intelligent, and we've got to make certain that everybody's trying to understand that, and then that it's not that difficult to do these conversions. Let's work together with permaculture people, because there are, those aspects of building the farm in a certain way that everything's complementary. Well, we've got to have the biological interaction also understood, so that you're not doing something that harms the very biology that you need to maximize productivity. And wherever you are around the world, you need to understand what's unique and special about the system you're working with. And the only way you, as a human being, can get a good idea of what's going on is you've got to have a microscope to see what the response is. You try this and it kills everything. Oops, okay, we're not going to do that anymore. You have to learn those kinds of things. So, you'll see benefits, you'll see higher production typically, and you're proving the fact that we grow more food for people using a biological approach than we can ever achieve with the chemical system.
Yeah, and we see that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked what Sadhguru had mentioned about, there's a marketing aspect to this. The word organic has been co-opted. I've been on a number of organic farms where the farming practices very much mimic a lot of the agrochemical practices, and the life in the soil is almost devoid. even though they're organic. You know, and I think it's a good step, but I think it's also been very co-opted. We really should be focusing on healthy soils, you know, making sure that we have that biodiversity in those soils versus just saying a moniker of organic. John, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I would say that, you know, it's sort of in the taste and in the health. I mean, everything is seemingly looking like when you have these wildfires and droughts and then floods and then you have species die out, you have all these catastrophes taking place. But that means that what we're seeing is something which is terribly out of balance. We're looking at something which is dysfunctional. And what I've been looking at over the decades is the difference between functional and dysfunctional. And functional is symbiotic. It's not a single issue thing. It's the collaborative co-creation and interactions, interbeing between all the different types of organisms that are alive. And human beings have been just unbelievably arrogant to believe that everything is there for us. And this is not a practical or useful point of view. This is a wrong-headed, and then it leads to feedback loops. So once you start studying and you can look at this, you actually are seeing that it's a cause and effect. So you have an effect that you're worried about. You're seeing this collapsing situation. Well, you can find out what caused it. And when you find out what caused it, you have to change that. And now we're so far in feedback loops from hundreds and thousands of years of mistakes that we really need to sit down and get into deep meditation about who we are, what we're doing here, and to recognize that this is the only planet we know of that has an oxygenated atmosphere or fertile soils or amazing biodiversity and a freshwater system like this. So, I mean, we're building the James Webb telescope, we're doing all these things to look for it, but this is still the only one we know. So it's a miracle, and we're here. So we better get this right. And we also need to look at the relationship not only between people and the planet, but people and other people. So this has gone way off over a long period of time. And we need to look at it and realize that everybody is equal and that we're living together on the earth. And if we want to continue to do that, we're going to have to live in peace. So, you know, part of restoring ecology is restoring peace and harmony in human civilization.
And I like that. And I think, John, when you use the word peace, I mean, it's not just peace between humans, but it's peace with humans in nature. It seems like we're at war with nature when in reality, we really should be part of and not at war with.
Who's going to win that battle?
Yeah.
It's going to be nature. Sorry. Maybe humanity can say we've won the first round.
Right.
And right now we're starting to see Mother Nature say, what do I need you for?
Mhm.
What do I need these pesky little human beings running around? You're just causing trouble. It's time to and she will. If we don't pay attention and start working with her, we're not going to be part of the scene anymore. It doesn't mean that life on this planet will end. It will just be very different.
Right. Okay, let's move to another question. And this question is from Pratap. And the question is, healthy soil is a prerequisite for biodiversity. A bottom-up method, in order to increase biodiversity, the degraded soils must be upgraded first. We have many natural minerals to recondition soils. What is the best compost for desert, sandy, saline soils to increase biodiversity? What results are expected with inoculation of humic and fulvic acids in sandy soil? So this kind of speaks to what can we do? What are some practical things? Let's take it away.
Yeah, and it's building first that diversity of microorganisms that you've got to get back into your soil. The simplest, easiest way to do that is to make your own compost. Compost without ever letting that pile go anaerobic. And you can usually tell anaerobic conditions starting to happen because your nose detects it. And as soon as you start smelling, and we go through the different smells in the classes, explaining, what does that mean? And so you learn how to turn, you learn about the starting materials, the recipes. You're going to look in your own area for the starting materials that you can add at, certain levels. It's not scientifically out to the 10th decimal point that we're going to be weighing. It's in general. We're going to put 2 buckets worth of this or 10 bucket worths of this in our compost pile. When you first start out, that's the best way to learn. And you grow the organisms that are indigenous to your biome, to the conditions around you. They've been selected by Mother Nature for the last 3.5 billion years. And I think she's probably got these different biomes figured out pretty well. We should not be so arrogant as coming along and saying, well, we can take some microorganisms from this area and microorganisms from over there and mix them together and it'll do. Well, you're going to have the natural indigenous organisms that are going to win under those conditions. And just recognize that you build your biome with your own compost. We can apply compost as a solid, but that can be kind of expensive. That's very laborious. I don't know about you, but I'm 70 years old and I'm a little not interested in spreading compost all over 1 or 2 acres. So you learn that there are other ways of applying those organisms and those foods that can grow the microorganisms for a little while your organisms are finding their niche in your soil on the surface of your plant. So we're going to make compost extracts or compost teas. And we go through when and how you would apply those in different systems. So you're going to maximize the effect.
I think a lot of people have a misconception too, that in a desert, there is no biology, there's no life. And that's just not true. There's biology that has been adapted to live in those conditions. And I like what you said, Elaine, we need to be making compost that can take the indigenous microorganisms from those environments. And that's the starting point to start making those changes.
And they're perfectly capable of dealing with desert conditions where there's very little water up here at the surface. That's okay. There will be water up there at the surface at some time, the rainy season. And so it's always possible to build up that biology. I always like the fact that saguaro cactus is a strongly fungal dominated root system, and it just cannot survive if it doesn't have the right balance of fungi to bacteria in and around its root system.
Right.
Elaine?
Yes.
I think we mentioned, I think in one of the other webinars in the Sinai Peninsula, we're working with Dr. John Todd. And so we can deal with the water, and we can also deal with growing very rapidly some of the early precursors of early soil. So interestingly, we can massively increase diatoms, and we can massively increase algae. And then we are also getting sediments from that have fallen off the land and gone into the seed. So we really need to inoculate these with bacteria. So we need to get you over there and work on this. It'll be exciting and interesting.
When can I come?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I'm supposed to be in Europe, but I'm in New Mexico because I had a small incident and had to go into the hospital. So I'm not over there yet, but as soon as possible, we'll work it out.
Yep, let me know the dates. That will be a lot of fun.
And John, actually, I want to ask you a follow-up with this question that came around, desert, sandy soils, hard to grow. But I know in a number of your, big restoration projects, you've been dealing with sandy soils and desert conditions. And can you just describe, the changes to the soil in particular as the systems do get restored?
Yeah, it's my earliest conclusions were that it's biodiversity, biomass, and accumulated organic matter or necromass. And nothing has proved that wrong. So you have these symbiotic relationships, and it's absolutely necessary to have all these aspects. So finally, you have to have water. And so in changing the biodiversity, biomass, and accumulated organic matter, you're creating a sponge. And then you're increasing the soil organic material. And depending on how much you understand, you can either use compost or you can use inoculates to increase the fungal and bacterial content. And the height of the canopy changes the surface temperatures. It starts to recycle moisture below the canopy. This is huge. So once you understand that, there's also something that we've been learning from Professor Mayan, who's for 30 years, he's quite old now. You wouldn't appreciate me saying that, but for 30 years, he was the director of the European Climate Monitoring Center for the Mediterranean, based in Spain. And what he found was that you have to get to 100 square kilometers, so 10 by 10 kilometers. And if you can restore an area of that size, then you're going to have an effect on holding moisture to reach critical mass for condensation and precipitation. So if we can do this, we're looking at something called eco-oasis, where we can make microclimates and then put them and connect between microclimates to reach 10 by 10 kilometers, and then keep going, just keep going. We have to restore the entire planet. So there's quite a lot of work to do. But once we understand that, the more people who come on board and understand it, and the more it's valued, the more that the value comes not from buying and selling products, but understanding that the life support systems on the earth are more valuable than the products, and that the products come from these functional systems. So when we make functional systems, you shouldn't have to buy and sell things in order to get paid. And then you also have to consider what is money, because if the money is coming from what? I mean, what is the money? It's just numbers really now. But if the money were actually based on ecological function, then you couldn't pollute, you couldn't destroy, you couldn't repurpose war materials and say, now we're going to dump this on your farm. That's completely insane.
Right.
So we're close to this tipping point now. And I think that's what I see is more of a transformation rather than a transition. Because if we try to transition, you have all these people who are vying for power, and that's the that's their thing. They don't do anything else all day long but vie for power. Well, we have to like say, well, you go over there and vie for power with each other, and we're going to restore Earth. And when it reaches the point where like more people are restoring the Earth, it's over. Those guys can do whatever they want, but it's done.
We should send them to the moon.
Yeah.
Argue
To the
over
moon,
property.
to the
Yeah. Go destroy something else.
Okay, let's move on to another
I think
question.
they want to go to Mars.
Mars, yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's good too.
Or real estate.
At least you can grow things on Mars.
So we have a question from Martina, and we talked a lot about organic matter. And her question is, how is organic content measured / quantified? Which steps to do in order to measure it? So this is a big thing. It's not, I think, set in stone as far as how we measure carbon. Any thoughts?
Well, typically you're going to take a sample and put it into an oven that brings the temperature up to a very high level. I'm not going to remember how high a temperature it is, but the carbon is going to all be blown off as CO2 in those instances. And so you can determine weighing the sample before and after, or measuring the increase in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. You get an idea of how much organic carbon was actually present in the system. There's now lots of other ways to do those measurements, but those are the measurements that we need to, for example, get a check for sequestering carbon in your soil. How much carbon has improved, or what's the increase of carbon in that soil. And so you've got to do periodic tests to determine how much you have increased or decreased the carbon in your soil. For instance, if you till your soil, somewhere around 50% of the organic carbon in that material in your soil is going to be killed, and it will volatilize. The CO2 will be gone. So you can very easily measure loss in biomass in the soil by just looking at CO2 being released by the act of tilling. So we know all tilling is going to highly disrupt that soil. Well, if you don't have soil and what you've got is dirt, then no big deal. You're not going to really be killing anything that you want to know about, the beneficial things, but it doesn't get you off of ground zero by going in and tilling. You might break up compaction, and that's a very important thing to do. And if you are have compaction in the soil, then you want to go in and till, but at the same time you till, let's put in the inoculum of all the indigenous organisms in your area so that you're getting that massive diversity back into the dirt, so you very rapidly can have soil. So it's not a very difficult thing to get those organisms back into the soil. It's think of the easiest way, tilling for the last time, that breaks up the compaction and gets the biology back down into the soil. So how do you measure compaction? Well, the easiest way to do it is go get a metal rod that you kind of put a point on the tip that you're going to be pushing in, and start pushing that metal rod through the soil. And if it gets to the point you can't push it into the soil anymore, or into we're talking dirt here now. If you can't push it, just lean over and put your fingers where the top of the soil is. How far did your metal rod go in? And you pull your metal rod out and you find out the compaction is in there at 1 inch or 2 inches or 3. Your roots can't grow beyond that compacted layer. And so how can your plant possibly get the nutrients that it requires if it can't get to those nutrients because of the compaction problem? So there's a first biggie. And yeah, I can go on and on.
Or measuring organic matter is a key tool that I use when working with my clients. It's, when we go onto an engagement with a client, we're trying to make that transformation from, agrochemical into farming with biology. We'll do a microbiology assessment, so we want to see what kind of biology we have. But one of the other things too is typically we'll have historicals of the chemical analysis, which a lot of times has organic matter. And it's a good indicator. I mean, I've been on farms where the organic matter is 0.25%. I mean, ridiculously low. And, that 3% number is something that really we're striving for. I tell my clients, we got to shoot for a minimum of 3. And the 3, we're going to start really starting to see some changes occurring. And, but like Sadhguru said, 3 is just a minimum. We need to be going to 6, 10, 12, 15, and keep on increasing the organic matter content. So I think measuring it's important. Go ahead, Elaine.
The measure of organic matter in the soil. People always ask me, well, what's the most important, or what's the best organic matter that you can get into your soil? And I usually say 100%. I want it all organic matter as long as it's been properly managed and it's composted in place, so to speak. If you dig down deep enough, you're going to run into the mineral layer, the sand, silt, and clay is down there. But where do you get the best production? It's typically in 100% organic matter soil. So, and please remember that there's a difference between organic matter and organic carbon. Typically, organic carbon is about 50% of the organic matter. So just be real careful when people are talking soils and carbon sequestration, that it's real clear you understand the difference.
John, anything you want to add to this question?
No.
Okay. Well, in your projects, was carbon measurement a major part of when you were doing the large scale restorations?
No. And
Okay.
I would say this about in China, the government wanted to eliminate poverty, and they wanted to stop the enormous erosion and siltation of the Yellow River, which was causing massive damage. Actually, it was the damage from siltation vastly higher than the cost of restoration. So once they got that in their mind, then they did the restoration without any problem, because it cost nothing. It was a quarter of the cost of the damage,
Right.
that you were getting from the erosion. The other thing that I think is important to realize is that the carbon marketing is a bit of a scam. That this it has been not done by people who even understand what carbon sequestration is. It's been done by people who want to control markets.
Right.
And so when they control the markets, they control the money flows. And so they're in charge. That's what they've been doing. And I learned this 30 years ago, right after the 97, when the clean development mechanism began. They were reinvesting in the same companies that had caused all of the problems by giving them more money for new, less polluting. So
Right.
It was less bad, but it wasn't good, and they were paying the people who created the problem, So it was kind of ridiculous. And I used to get angry about these kinds of things, but now I look at it kind of philosophically. We're into absurdism, it's funny. If it wasn't so tragic, it would be hilarious, but it's just a little bit funny.
Because instead of looking for the carbon in the soil, you can just look for the color of the soil. And that's going to tell you a great deal about what's the percent carbon that you've got in your soil. Soil that is gray in color, it doesn't have a even brown or tan tinge. that's dirt in the worst possible way. As soon as you start getting the organic matter back into the soil, you start to see the tan color. Now a nice medium brown, deeper brown. What we're aiming for is 70% cocoa color to the soil, because that tells you that you've probably got the maximum amount of organic matter in that soil that you need. And you do that with your own eyeballs. So why do we need to, well, okay.
Yeah, well, like John says, the markets are there to control the money flow. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, let's move on to another question. And this question's from Nicola. While leveraging compost to restore and rebalance soil organisms is the simple answer, as Dr. Ingham teaches us in the Soil Food Web Foundation class, it has to be the right compost with the right organisms at the right quantity and aerobic. If not, compost can be detrimental to the soil health and plants. How can we ensure that this is part of the knowledge we are sharing?
Well, that's what I think the camps are for. And that's why we so strongly support people getting out there and getting fingers into the soil, get an understanding of for this system, what is the right set of compost, the right sets of organisms. And we just want to make certain that that we have enough of those things, of all the right organisms in the right places. And then the plant itself will work out the actual balance. So to some extent, we're putting all the starting materials in there, we're getting things going, and then let the plant rule the roost because it knows what it needs.
Yeah, this is a challenge I run into all the time, which is the access to good compost, stuff that's biologically complete compost. And there is an awareness, I think now. I'm working with a lot more compost producers, and they're kind of getting driven by their marketplace, which is people are kind of asking the question, well, what kind of biology do you have in that compost? And I think that's going to start to change some of the behaviors of composters. Unfortunately, the vast majority of compost is produced, I think, in the United States, from my experience, is putrefied organic matter. It's made in a very anaerobic conditions. And the quality and the tool that we would use is not there in those composts. And so we really do need to have a massive movement of people making good biologically complete composts. That is a significant challenge that we as a school and people working in this profession really need to kind of demand and help push along. John, any comment to that?
Well, yeah, I think that we just need to do this collectively. We need to have conversations continuously and everybody be in relationship with each other. This is so crucial. I kind of look at it, it's was explained to me once as going from me to we. Mm-hmm. Like if we think, well, we have to restore all degraded lands on the earth, I'll do it. No, I'm not going to do it. We can do it. Humanity can do it as a species on a planetary scale, but each of us as individuals can't do it. But we can do our part. We can be part of this, and we are part of a larger organism, and so a meta-organism, and that's okay. That's not too bad. I know when I was thinking early on, like, please listen to me, I was grabbing people and saying, you have to listen to me. And they were like, get away. Who are you? Go away. And so I finally realized, well, all right, they don't want to hear. So I won't bother with them. And then some people came to me. Actually, it was an intervention by a group called the Society for Organizational Learning. And they said, now look, it's not up to you. You don't get to decide what human civilization is going to do. You may be completely right. We think you're completely right, but it's still not up to you. It's up to what human civilization does. So if human beings are so incredibly vacuous as to commit suicide by destroying their mother, then, well, that's not your fault. You're doing what you can. But what I think we all need to do now, I've been looking at it from more extreme positions lately because of the refugee situation. We're getting a lot of requests from refugees and from the homeless and the hungry. And I think what we need to do is every community has to have central kitchens, creator spaces, and cultural stages. This is the basic infrastructure that's between human beings and biology. So if we eat together, we work together, we play together, and we transmit our culture together happily as a community, we're going to be strong enough to do what we need to do to restore the soils, to restore the hydrological cycle, and to restore the forests and the biodiversity around the world. But we have to get this in our mind, and we have to learn how to do that. And that's what I like especially about ecosystem restoration camps. Because in ecosystem restoration camps, we're reaching the scale where we can have botanical sanctuaries. We're reaching the scale where we can do river shed restoration from the headwaters to the sea by gathering all the groups and all the communities together and work together. That's how you do it. And if we can take the marginalized and the people who are failing, why are they failing in the existing system? Because the existing system is corrupt and doesn't care a thing about them. And so why don't we say, no, you're a human being. We're all human beings. Let's take care of each other. So everybody eats. Nobody's hungry in our community. Everybody has meaningful work to do. What do you want to do? You want to do the dishes? You want to work in the community? You want to plant trees? You want to be trained in fire ecology or fire prevention or fire response? We'll do it. We'll teach you. We'll come and take care. There's no need to lie around doing nothing. Work it out. That's what we need to do, I think.
Yeah, it's great points. I like that whole, not me, it's we. Because it's the collective that's going to make the change, not just the individual. All right. Next question. Let's go to a question from Lasonia. And can you please let me know how utilizing rabbit manure and urine can help in building soil, making contributions as they have the best manure in the world and work awesome with vermicomposting? So how do we utilize animals and other species to help us along in this journey?
They absolutely can use the rabbit manure and urine. You want to have a recipe when you're making compost, because I would always compost everything, especially manures coming out of animals, because the digestive system of animals is a great place to have disease-causing organisms growing in that system. So you want to take that manure and make certain that you compost it in a fashion that doesn't allow the disease-causing organisms to grow, that will actively reduce the number of any disease-causing organism in it, because you have to have, excuse me, predators in the system in that composting process, and those predators will selectively take out things like E. coli, Salmonella, Shigella, Pasteurella, the disease-causing organisms. And so the product of your composting process is not detectable level of any of those pathogens. And that's what we really like to see when we're working on compost, is that the bad guys are not detectable in that compost pile. So good food, the things that you looked at, but in a compost pile, you also want to have woody materials like shredded wood material, the leaves of trees after the plants have taken all the nutrients that they can remove from those leaves before those leaves fall to the floor. of the ecosystem. So you want those woody components. You also want green because you want to make sure that the beneficial bacteria have something to grow on, and their bacteria, those bacterial species are the food that they want is the sugars, the proteins, the not complex versions of those simple compounds. And then you want some party food because you want to get these organisms to grow as rapidly as possible so that in that reproductive process, they're releasing heat. And that heat then is another way of making certain you'll get rid of the pathogens and the pests and the unwanted organisms because they don't survive those high temperatures above 131 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, maybe you don't want to do thermal composting. Maybe you want to do worm composting. Passage through an earthworm's digestive tract takes care of the pathogens and the pests and the parasites. So you just have to make sure you've got enough worms in your compost pile. You maintain conditions totally aerobic because it's damaging. You will kill your earthworms if your pile goes anaerobic. So again, you've got to make certain of that the environment allowing any of these organisms to grow and wipe out the diseases and pests and problems organisms. You've got to make sure it doesn't go anaerobic. You got to make sure the temperature stays within the range needed for whichever way you're composting. So we go into all of those different ways of composting. Pick the compost using the type of composting process that fits with your life. With thermal compost, you're going to put a pile together and you are going to be intensely involved with that pile for the next 5 to 10 days. And so make sure that you've got no, business that's going to distract you from your compost pile, going out and checking it once in the morning, once in the afternoon, and turning if it needs to be turned. With worm composting, you're not going to do the turning. The earthworms are going to do the turning for you. So you've just got to layer in the food so that the earthworms use up all of that fresh organic material that you put into the pile. They've got to process it. They got to pass it through their digestive system. So you're only putting enough food that will be completely utilized by the earthworms within a 3-day period of time. Because fruit flies and other disgusting flies lay eggs in that undecomposed plant material. And if you don't get the earthworm to come along and eat that, you're going to all of a sudden have a plague of fruit flies or fungus gnats or white flies or larval. You don't want to think about it. Got to learn all the ways of doing the processing correct so you don't have any of the problems.
So John, what about, in the ecosystem restoration camps and the regenerative agriculture space, how important do animals become part of those systems that you guys are creating?
Well, I think there's some that are focusing on holistic pasture management, but not too many. In fact, this one here is 1,700 acres, and it's pretty badly impacted by overgrazing. Mm-hmm. They may be trying to do something like that. I just got here last night, so I haven't really been filled in completely. I think Alan Savory is not wrong. He's, it's a specific thing, but there is a question about whether domesticated animals can substitute for diverse wildlife. I'm not totally sure that that's possible. But I mean, a lot of people are looking for something that can just keep going without causing too much trouble for the existing civilization. and I'm not sure. I think we may be sort of past planetary boundaries to the point where we actually need to consider very seriously what's happening.
And I think animals, both domesticated and also allowing the natural ecosystem. You know, one of the things that we use a lot in the vineyard space is owls. If you build habitat for owls, they will come in and happily eat those rodents that are causing damage to the vines, and they will do that job without question and do a fantastic job at that. Building snake piles and other, habitat for natural, animals to be able to come in and be able to basically kind of build that ecosystem. And you can do it in a very smart and wise way so that they become
another big
helpers.
thing.
I think we lost your
I
second,
think
John.
another really important thing that we haven't mentioned, something that we haven't mentioned yet, are the pollinators. The pollinators are really, really urgently needed to help out. So
Agreed. Yeah.
go
Think about
pollinators.
Go pollinators for sure. I mean, getting not just bees, I mean, just the honeybee. I mean, setting habitat for all the different mason bees and the predator wasps. I mean, there's so many pollinators out there that are being impacted by the things that we do. Yeah, I agree with you. Pollination is going to be a key thing. Okay, I think we have time for one last question, and we'll make this kind of a quick question here. So the next question is from, I'm gonna back out here, sorry. And let me just find my place here. Here we go. This question is from Doro, and what can you do if you are already working with the Ingham method yourself, but the farmers around you are fertilizing fields with liquid manure?
Yeah, leave while they're spreading it because the smell is going to be, but it, the only problem really is if there's leaching coming out of the areas that they fertilized with liquid manure, because that's going to be a concentration effect. It's going to kill some of a lot of your organisms if it moves, subterraneally, or if it erodes across the erosion across the surface of the soil. You're going to have to recover the biology where those things, that material moved through the system. Be aware, maybe put up a barrier so that the trees, for example, that have enough thickness that the smell doesn't penetrate through that hedge, if you will, and then all of the root systems in the soil that will happily take up that high concentration of salts and chemicals that are in the liquid manure. So you're basically allowing your neighbor to send over the nutrients that your plants might need. And I would probably try to get that next door neighbor to come over and see what you're doing and see how much less work there is for them to do, so that they would switch over to a saner form of growing plants.
Yeah, I find farmers talk a lot. I've had a number of my clients where they're seeing amazing results, disease resistance, and farmers are coming to them, their neighbors, and saying, "What are you doing? You've been crazy at what you've been doing, but it seems to be working. Please tell me more." And I encourage everybody who's doing this kind of work to be vocal, to actually maybe set up, hey, let's pull a meeting together. Let's have people come in and let me tell you about my practices, and don't be afraid to share those things. And also, there's a lot of different grower groups that that you could go to and actually talk to them and actually provide them information about what does the Soil Food Web do? Why does farming and focusing on the biology in the soil so important, and the results that you're seeing? It's it's that, kind of confirmation. A lot of farmers will look at that and say, wow, somebody's doing something different. They're out exceeding the averages for our county. What are they doing? I want to know. And some farmers kind of keep that close to the vest, say, I want a competitive advantage. But I think we've got to be beyond that. I think we've got to show, yeah, you can do this too. John, any comments you'd like to add to that?
Well, I would just add that definitely in the List Plateau, one of the very important things was having some natural zones. So if you've got something like this happening next door to you and there's nothing there, you might consider a buffer zone where you made a food forest between you and and maybe some coppicing trees or something where you could harvest poles every couple of years from them, and they would come back again and again, and they could kind of be in between this horrific situation.
The hedgerow kind of thing, right?
But you could make it bigger.
Sure.
You could make it bigger, and at the inside, I think you could go with stuff that you were going to eat. Probably on the outside, you probably want to have coppicing trees or something.
Okay, I think we are at the top of the hour. What I'd like to do is I'd like to go ahead and close with just a reminder about our upcoming webinar series. So let me jump to that slide real quick. So we've gone through 3 webinars in our July event, and we have one more webinar, which is going to be how you can impact your ecosystem, careers in ecosystem restoration and regenerative ag. And that's going to be 11 a.m. Pacific time on Thursday, July 28th. And again, if you missed webinars 1 and 2, definitely go back and look at the replays of those webinars. There's a lot of great information that was shared there as well. And before we close, I'd like to just thank all the support system behind us that makes these webinars run. They do a fantastic job in getting the information out there, keeping us on track, doing the tech support and all those kind of good things. So thank you very much. I also like to thank all the attendees. Your interest really is going to allow this information to be able to get out and infect other minds and really, push this message forward. So thank you for attending. And definitely great thanks to Sadhguru for attending today. It was great to hear his knowledge and his wisdom. And John, your information always is just fascinating, and the work that you're doing is transformational. Thank you so much. And Dr. Elaine Ingham, for me personally, this is you've infected my mind, and you've got me to change my whole world order here and doing it to a different direction. And thank you so much for that.
Well, thank you, Brian, for being the host here and keeping everything on track. And even though we have some issues with fading of people, you've done a great job. And again, I tell the whole crew backstage, you're amazing. And these interactions could not happen without your help. Thank you.
You're here. Okay, so this concludes webinar 3. We'll see you guys on webinar 4. Thank you, everybody.
Ciao.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Don't forget to click that like button, subscribe with new videos.